Hi, I would like to welcome you to the BMES webinar series, Interview with Industry, put on by the Student Affairs Subcommittee. My name is Matthew Brown. I'm a PhD candidate at the Mayo Clinic Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm a member of the Student Affairs Subcommittee, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. I'd like to introduce our guests. I have the pleasure of introducing Emma Moran. Emma is a research engineer at Cook Medical, where she works on the New Ventures team looking at product discovery for Cook. Before I ask Emma for a brief background on her journey to her current position, I just want to thank all of you for joining us today, especially given the world events associated with COVID-19. I would like to kind of encourage all of you to please write in your questions for Emma now or anytime throughout the interview. We're excited to answer them and whatnot. So I'd like to ask Emma now to take it away and provide us a brief background on her journey to Cook.
Thank you, Matthew. So thanks all for joining today. I graduated from University of Rochester, undergrad in biomedical engineering, and then went on to get my PhD, also in biomedical engineering from Wake Forest, Virginia Tech School of Biomedical Engineering and Sciences. I did work on regenerative medicine and biomechanics while there. After graduating, I joined a small startup company for a short while called Biorg that aimed at commercializing 3D multicellular models and was heavily based on my dissertation research. After working there for a bit, I wanted to transition into medical device industry and was able to join Cook Medical up in West Lafayette, Indiana. And I've been there for about 4.5 years, as Matthew mentioned, on the New Ventures team, looking into product discovery type projects.
Great, Emma. Thank you for that background. So just to kind of get the ball rolling, maybe you could describe the process in terms of getting that first job from your PhD into the startup, maybe some challenges associated with it, and some kind of tips that you could give maybe both undergraduates and graduate students about getting that first job. I know a lot of us are really worried about that and thinking about how do we go from academia or education into that first job.
Yeah, it's a great question. So probably my job into Cook was a more typical job interview type process. In terms of the startup, it spun out of my work in graduate school, out of my lab, and so that was really just through connections with my advisor, and I got lucky enough to get into that role through that, so it wasn't a standard looking for a job type activity. However, when I wanted to move into medical devices and get through Cook, I did a lot of networking with people I knew in the industry, as well as connections at Cook itself. Just, hey, I'm interested, this is my resume, this is what I'm looking for type stuff. Also, have a lot of conversations to figure out what type of job I was looking for and what I would be interested in. So trying to, while I was a grad student, did a lot of investigating into different career opportunities, such as, technology transfer, talking to people in that industry, small startup type environments, as well as larger companies, and just trying to get exposure to as many types of jobs as possible to figure out where you think would be the best fit for you and where you'd be happiest long term. So from those conversations, I knew I wanted to get a job like the one at Cook, and so just try to get my resume out there and connect to as many people as I could, just to, sometimes it's hard to get your resume seen, so as much networking as you can do to get it in somebody's hands, then give you the shot at a phone interview and then an in-person interview from there. Yeah.
So you kind of talk about networking and really using networking to transition from kind of the startup into your current position at Cook. What is your approach to networking? Has it changed over time? Do you have any tips, potential events, or things you did to kind of to network into that role?
Yeah, so networking is tricky, and I definitely don't think it's something I'm great at, something I'm always trying to improve at. What I did is, especially within graduate school, I think I got a little bit better at it than I was in undergrad, but tried to find opportunities to network with people that were outside of traditional academia. So I knew I wanted to enter into industry. And don't get me wrong, the relationships you build within academia are important as well, and actually what led me to get the startup position. But other things I did within undergrad, I did an internship with our technology transfer office, which ultimately wasn't a career I decided to go down, but through that I met a lot of interesting people. And made some connections into industry through that because you're working on relationships between universities or hospitals and industry partners. Just staying in close touch with people I had worked with in the past, people from my undergraduate institution. There's conferences and other things that when you attend them, you always meet new people as part of those experiences, as well as just through the opportunities I was given in the startup, and got to meet people through that way. So there's also some other activities you can get involved in. For example, in graduate school, I did a business case competition that was held by the business school at Wake that the science students were invited to participate in. So through that activity, I got to meet a lot of people as well. So, just trying to do as many different activities as I could to meet new and interesting people who you never know when in your career or journey that they may be able to help you out.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. You briefly mentioned your time at the tech transfer office at Wake Forest. Could you maybe talk about the value of internships, both as a graduate student, undergraduate, potential skills you learned, through internships, both as a graduate student and as an undergrad, and how that maybe translated to your current position or maybe your future goals?
Yeah, I thought that was my internship was a really rewarding experience for me. As I said, it's obviously not a career I went into, but I learned a lot of important skills that I wouldn't have necessarily gotten just through normal graduate student work. So, for example, I learned a lot about intellectual property, licensing, how to do literature searches in terms of prior art, how to write patents, how to read patents, what types of I learned a lot about commercialization of research. And ultimately, I think that experience helped me even get my position at Cook as well as in my current role, because intellectual property is a huge part in industry of my role within Cook, or anybody's role within an industry like medical device, is understanding intellectual property and how to best utilize it as part of your work. So that was a great experience for me, especially knowing that I wanted to go into industry. And I think helped out in the interview process. I was able to say, while I haven't written any patents, I am familiar with IP, how to read it, how to understand it, how to search for it, etc. I also mentioned the business case. Sometimes there's other opportunities to do internships if you know you want to go into industry, or you know you want to do something more on the business side of things. You could potentially find internships in that sense. You may also be able to find internships directly with an industry, a medical device company, for example, or a pharmaceutical company, if that's something you know you want to do. I know within Cook, occasionally we do have internships from graduate students, and we do have a fairly robust undergraduate co-op program, which I know is a really valuable experience for the co-ops that come through there. I answer your question, Matt?
Yep. Sorry, I think the call dropped for a second there. So you talk about some of these skills that you learned throughout your time at the tech transfer office, both at the startup. And you talked about how you convey these kind of learning these skills during the interview, but before you get the interview, you need to kind of submit a resume or network or prepare a cover letter. So kind of maybe you could describe what your approach on conveying these skills on a resume, on a cover letter, in informal networking to kind of generate interest from companies on getting that job.
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, probably something that I can improve on always, and definitely not an expert, but I can tell you what I've learned from my experience job hunting and talking to people is that I would definitely create an individual cover letter and resume or CV where it's appropriate for each position you're applying to. So really trying to understand the position as best that you can and figuring out which of your skills you think is most applicable to that particular position. And in doing that exercise, then you can figure out which of your own skills you want to highlight in a cover letter or in your resume. So for example, in my resume, you may want to, at the very top of it, bring out some highlights from the underlying text that you think is particularly applicable to the position you're applying to. And then, also you need to consider what the role it is you're applying for and tailor the rest of your resume around that. Some places it may be appropriate to send a CV instead of a resume, if it's more of an academic type role, or even a really academic type industry position that is heavily research focused or something like that. In those cases, it may be appropriate to put a CV there. And yeah, I like to put kind of an objective statement on the top of the resume that's applicable to that job. So for example, if you knew that technology transfer or intellectual property is going to be a key function of this position, you may want to highlight that in that area.
That makes a lot of sense in terms of tailoring to the specific position. Do you think you should have a different approach for applying to a startup versus like a larger company like Cook?
Yeah, probably. I think I don't want to generalize it. I would say the more important thing isn't necessarily that one company is small and the other company is large. I think the important difference would be what you're doing at that small company versus what the role at the large company would be. So, at a small company, the startup that I worked for, what my position was pretty much 100% research and other functions in the lab. And so those skills would be the ones that you'd want to highlight. My research experience my lab-based experience, where a lot of the work I do at Cook, I do a lot more of kind of the business side of medical device industry, and there's some lab work as well, but it's not that those technical skills maybe aren't as important for the large industry job, at least this one. But, there could be a large company where it is heavily research focused, in that sense, those resumes may be very similar. So I'd say that it's less important maybe the size of the company, but more specifically what your role is going to be at each place.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense given your experiences and how each company is going to be unique in their own ways. In terms of working at the startup, do you think there were certain lessons you learned, certain skills you learned that maybe helped you along your path so far, or things that you really appreciated looking back at your time working at Biorg?
Yeah, it was a really great experience for me. I was only there about a year, but when I started, it was me and one other person, and so, I learned a lot about like how to set up a lab and, very basic things that you wouldn't necessarily have to do at a larger company, and it was my first experience looking with the business side of science, and I'd helped write grants and stuff in graduate school, but I never really thought a ton about how to commercialize the research that I was doing and the different pathways to commercializing that research. And so I think the startup was my first experience with that aspect of science and of research, was how, okay, this is great, but at the end of the day, it's a startup company and the goal is to make money so that you can continue being a company, with the eventual goal of helping society or whatever it is that the company is trying to do. So the how to make money bit was something new to me, and then transitioning into industry was a good or into a larger medical device company was a valuable skill to begin to learn at that role.
Yeah, you talk about your kind of this transition from engineering to business. I know during undergrad, now a lot of engineers are interested in going towards more of the business side. Do you have any tips? Do you suggest pursuing further education like an MBA? Were there challenges transitioning into more of the business side of medical devices?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and even within the past couple of years within Cook, it's been a little bit of a transition for me. I'm getting more involved in the business side of things, and so I'm still learning a lot. I guess the advice I would have is, if it's something that you're interested in, that there's going to be a lot of opportunities to learn more. I wouldn't say that going out and getting an MBA is the best route for everyone. It may be a good pathway for some people. For me, I don't have an MBA, but I'm learning a lot within my current job, learning from other people, talking to other people. There's courses you can take, online courses at, local business schools or universities if you want to learn about a particular topic, let's say, finance, for example. So there's options for that, certificate programs and stuff that aren't a full MBA. So I think there's a lot of opportunities out there to learn, even just reading lots of articles. In the business route, there's articles out there all the time on different topics within business, and even particular to medical device or med tech or science in general, that are interesting and can be good tools to help you learn about the business aspect of the med tech industry.
Okay. Yeah, I think that really good advice in terms of using resources both online as well as within the company. So in terms of kind of your day-to-day kind of work life, in terms of at Cook, what right now, what does it look like? Do you travel a lot for work? What are your kind of responsibilities? And was this? I'm sure this was a lot different kind of at the startup where it was more research. Maybe you could describe both kind of day-to-day kind of work life, both at Cook now and at Biorg.
Sure. So I'll start with Biorg first. So my role there was, as I mentioned, pretty much 100% research or activities associated with research. So if I wasn't in the lab, I was, in the office writing reports or making presentations or, reading a lot of literature, or even some of the tasks you don't necessarily think of, like ordering supplies and equipment and things like that. So that was my position at Biorg, and then once I transitioned to Cook, I've had a couple of different roles there. When I first started at Cook, I was probably, I'd say maybe 20-30% of the time in the lab, running experiments, doing testing, developing prototypes, and then again the remainder of the time at the desk doing research, market analysis, presentations, reading literature, that sort of thing. More recently at Cook, as I said, I've been getting a little more into the business side, and so my time in the lab has decreased. And there's still a lot of research being done at the desk, but I'm at the more front end of that research. So I'm looking at analyzing clinical needs, doing market analysis, evaluating different new technologies that come in, and looking for growth opportunities, whether that means passing it off to internal Cook R&D or looking at growth opportunities through other partnerships with other companies, and so on. So it's still research in the sense, but a lot of it is, at the computer rather than in the lab. And I enjoy, both of those things. I think that's something for, students to keep in mind is, are you okay with that? Are you okay with, being more at the, research level at, sitting at your computer screen rather than being hands-on? I've met some students who are, absolutely love just being in the lab all the time, and want to be more hands-on, and that's great. And I think that's something to just keep in mind when you're looking at future careers, is what you enjoy doing in that aspect.
And how would you compare this to maybe your time in as a PhD student in academia? Do you think some of the skills you learned or some of the kind of workflow they translate to your current job? Some of the lessons maybe you learned in academia.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably the most important skill I learned in just being in engineering and being in science is just general critical thinking skills. More of, this is a problem, how do you solve it, how do you tackle it, and how do you communicate your findings, whether that's through reports or presentations. I think all of those kind of like softer skills are really valuable no matter what career you go into. The actual research I did in graduate school, I don't do at all now. So, I specialize in liver biomechanics. I don't do any of that. But I think a lot of the skills that I learned while I was doing that research, like how to design an experiment, how to review the literature, how to learn about a new topic even, or learn about a new area, how to present, how to communicate are all really important skills that I learned that are translatable to my current position.
So if I'm a undergraduate who's interested in industry, or an undergraduate who's thinking about should I do a PhD, should I go try to get a job in industry, should I get an industrial internship? Do you suggest to do research? Do you suggest to go get that PhD? Or do you, what is your perspective on someone who's interested in industry and, the value of research or a PhD?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I obviously contemplated when I was an undergraduate. So I graduated from UR in 2010, and this was, right after kind of the economic crisis hit around 2008, and hiring was still pretty low when I graduated. So to be honest, there were not a lot of positions out there in medical device industry for people with just bachelors. And the ones that I was able to find I wasn't necessarily interested in. They tended to be more sales types positions, which are great for some people, but I didn't think would be a good fit for me. And I knew that I, wanted to get into R&D. I also didn't have any internship or co-op experience in the medical device industry, which I think, would have been helpful in getting that first position. So I went to grad school not sure if I was going to get a master's or PhD. I ended up, really enjoying it, getting PhD, and then eventually getting the, the position that in medical device and R&D type space. And so is research necessary? I think that depends on what you want to do. I think for me, I think there were benefits of doing research, whether that's a master's or a PhD, even though I knew I didn't want to stay in academia. Again, learning all of those softer skills in terms of critical thinking and presenting and writing, all of those things, I think were skills that I learned. So I guess it depends what you want to do in the future. I don't think that completing research and then shifting careers is at all uncommon. I have a lot of coworkers who went down kind of similar paths as me that, they aren't doing now what they did in undergrad or graduate research. So, I don't think it hurts in any way, but it's also, may not be required in every situation. If you don't want to do research and you know that now, then I think that there's career opportunities for you in that aspect.
Yeah, so for someone who's interested in either at the PhD level or the undergraduate or master's level entering device development space, what are some maybe tips or what are some pitfalls to avoid in terms of entering this space at this point?
Yeah. So one of the things I think is important in at least at a larger company, like the one I'm working on now, is the ability to be adaptable. So, you may even get hired for your skills in one area, but you can switch projects, switch focus areas a lot within a company, and being able to adapt to different areas, I think will help you in your career. You know, for example, if you're a microbiologist and the company decides that they're not doing microbiology anymore, if you're an adaptable person, you know, you'll be able to find other areas within the company to succeed. And I think that's something I've observed, at least in my company, is the people who are adaptable and can take on different roles tend to be more successful. Another thing I think is important in terms of research and industry is knowing when to stop sometimes. So in academia, you know, you're really looking, you're doing research, you're trying to the bottom of whatever problem you're trying to solve. And sometimes in industry, you need to know when you've dug far enough in research and when it's time, this is good enough, let's move on. I think that's another important thing that I've learned in industry.
So are these lessons something that you've kind of learned through experience, or did you know these going in? Were there things that you kind of wish you knew before you started your job at Cook, before you started doing more industrial research and industrial type opportunities?
I think a lot of it I've learned along the way. Some of it I learned through networking, so talking to people I knew in the medical device industry while I was in graduate school and while I was looking for positions, to try to ask about, you know, what is the work environment like? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What do you think are, you know, important skills to have in your field and so on. So I think it's a combination for me, at least, of learning on the job and trying, before I started, trying to talk to as many people as I could prior to joining.
Okay. So you talk about kind of learning on the job. Was this something that, you know, is encouraged at Cook, or is it a lot of independent, you know, learning on the job? Is it, you know, team-based? Do you have any tips for basically kind of developing as a engineer or developing as a business person, you know, throughout your career? How to expedite that process, how to optimize that on-the-job training?
Yeah, so I think there's always things, you know, you can do independently if you take initiative, such as, you know, reading or talking to people you know, reaching out to others in the company as mentors or people to learn from. And then there's some things that, you know, Cook has done to help out, like they'll pay for continued learning, which is, I know a lot of people in our company take advantage, and I know that similar companies have similar initiatives to help with continued education. But I would just encourage people to be really proactive about it. If you know you want to get into business, you know, find courses or certificate programs or something that you think would be helpful and you'd be interested in, and try to speak with your manager, your boss about it in when you meet, about your goals in your personal development, and just be a real champion for yourself and your development throughout your career.
So in terms of kind of building on that, in terms of goals, do you set long-term and short-term goals for yourself, your career, your current work? Do you have any tips for, you know, accomplishing both, you know, short-term career goals, longer-term career goals, like that?
Yeah. So yes, both of those. So work off individual development plan that has short-term goals as well as long-term goals. I would encourage everyone to do that. whether you're currently in school or, looking for a position, because I think at the very least it makes you think about what you want to do and where you want to be headed and what you need to do to achieve the goals you've set for yourself. And then I would encourage people to make sure you're reviewing those on a regular basis, however long that may be, every couple of months or every half a year, at least every year, to hold yourself accountable and to make sure that you're doing everything you can in order to achieve your goals, or if your goals have changed, which, they will as you evolve and your career evolves. And then, working with your manager, your advisor. Oh, sorry. I was going to say working with your manager, your advisor, or your peers or teachers or whoever you have at your resources to say, this is where I want to go, and who you need to help you achieve those goals is also important.
Yeah. So you talk about, who you need to achieve those goals and mentorship and stuff like that. And I know it can be difficult to, find that mentor to, help you into that, that first job or connect you into that industry. Do you have any tips in terms of, one, identifying mentors, as well as kind of characteristics of really good mentors you've had?
Yeah. So I guess for me, finding mentors is really just about, relationship building, is trying to talk to as many people as you can. And then, for me at least, I didn't go out and say, oh, I want this person to be my mentor. Like I'm just, going to talk to them out of the blue. They've always kind of came to be from relationships that I've had with, coworkers or people I knew through school or through, for example, my internship and so on, and just, improving those relationships over time. And eventually those kind of formed into mentorship type arrangements, which I think, if anyone's willing to sit down and talk to you about your career or careers in general, I think you should take advantage of any opportunity that you have. Even if it's not a helpful discussion, that's fine, and you move on. But you had the discussion, and chances are it will be helpful. So, yeah, I'd say, for me, it's just a matter of trying to listen to anyone who will speak to me and learn from anyone that I can.
Yeah, I completely agree. And from my personal experience, I just want to echo that, like, meeting people and, utilizing network opportunities like the BMES annual meeting. I use it as a way to catch up with my mentors from both graduate school and undergrad, and really kind of continue to develop that relationship, because you never know when, I'm sure from your experience, you never know when a new opportunity arises and you have a question about something, and you happen to know, or you have a good relationship with someone from events like the annual meeting, to chat and catch up and kind of pick their brain about stuff like that.
Exactly.
So kind of switching gears and talking about I want to kind of echo in terms of goals and the future. Where do you see medical device development going? And what skills do you think like an undergraduate or a graduate student would need for the future, what you see as the future medical device development? Is there any keys, techniques, or skills that they might need to think about when they're preparing for their job?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of trends kind of in the medical device industry. For example, artificial intelligence and big data, value-based healthcare, kind of these big trends. So I think biomedical, there's going to be, continued demand for biomedical engineers. I think a lot of demand on maybe more positions on like informatics and kind of big data type roles. I think that for undergrads and people looking in the medical device career, I mentioned before, co-ops or internships, any opportunity that you can take to get some experience while you're still in school working at a company won't only help you get a future job, but should really help you decide and understand if that's a career that you want. In terms of technical skills, I think just being a well-rounded engineering student, having a good grasp of basic engineering principles, but also, as I mentioned before, being adaptable, being able to learn about new topics, learn new skills, being able to write, being able to present, all of those are important skills for medical device, but, all industry in general.
Yeah, and I can echo that from being at a major medical institution. AI, big data is kind of really what the future of, at least at Mayo as well, what we're really excited about here. So do you think, for someone, let's say they're interested in going into medical device and, they hear that, big data is the future, but they're, how do I get experience? Do you think that they're maybe like potentially school projects or, potentially integrating big data into something that they're already doing in their, research or their current internship or even a school project would be, sufficient to kind of get the ball rolling and help them stand out from their, help their resume stand out?
Yeah. I think any opportunity you have to do projects and other activities outside of your normal coursework helps your resume. So, design competitions or, different clubs and groups, any opportunity you have within your university to get some more experience on topics such as analytics or, wherever it really is, just to kind of separate you from all the other resumes is kind of those extracurriculars experiences. And so, if you do know you want to get into informatics or something, I would just encourage you to look at opportunities within your own university or clubs or projects. And I think it's, at least for me, more interesting when students kind of branch outside of their own department, and they also collaborate with people from other groups and specialties in your university. Shows that is a good skill to have, and it also shows that you work well with others, you work well with people who may not think like you do, and those are all good skills to have.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the value of technical opportunities, technical experiences, but I really want to hear your thoughts on really the value of kind of non-technical opportunities or working in nonprofits. So, for example, I know you were involved in your local BMES chapter in graduate school, I believe. What is do you think do you find value in these opportunities? Does Cook value, involvement outside of just engineering and stuff like that? Maybe what skills you learned and.
Yeah, so I think organizations such as BMES or other technical organizations, other groups you have the opportunity to be a part of are all valuable. It's important for your personal networking as well as career networking. So Cook does encourage you to, be members of groups, attend meetings, even if it's just to learn and to make connections with people. It's all valuable experience. You never know what conversation you're going to have and what that's going to teach you, what you may teach others, what relationships you may build. So as many of those non-coursework type groups and activities you can get involved in, I don't think being a part of them hurts in any way. It can only be helpful. You can only meet more people, network more, learn more, and all of that are great things to do.
Yeah, and I can definitely second that in terms of my involvement with BMES. It's really been able to help me network, meet people. You never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to talk to through these organizations and opportunities. So what platform do you use to maintain these relationships? How do you maintain them? Do you mostly use in-person interactions? Do you use LinkedIn? Less formal methods of platforms to maintain these relationships and whatnot?
Yeah, whenever, I'm at a meeting or something like that, I try to connect with, people I know if they're there. For example, I've been to, BMES and I was in grad school. I try to meet up with all, everyone there from undergrad that I may know or people at other universities you may know. And then LinkedIn I also think is helpful. I'm not a super user of LinkedIn, but I do think it's a good way to stay connected with people from the past. And, if you need to reach out in the future, it's also a great way to do that. If you may not have current contact information and stuff. Email, keep in touch with that. And then, less formal people that, connect with Instagram or Facebook or, just keeping relationships with friends and over time or people you know from the past are always, any way you can keep in touch, to me, is beneficial.
Yeah, and I can, in terms of, from my stance as a graduate student, I know a lot of academics use Twitter for kind of promotion and networking for both their academics as well as their research. Has industry also started to utilize Twitter as like a networking platform, or is it mostly kind of constrained to academia at this point?
Where I see or hear mentioned, I have to admit I don't use Twitter at all. I don't have an account. But where I see it more, Cook does. I know they're trying to, it is, I think, gaining popularity in industry a little more. Where I see it more is actually with physicians, with clinicians that we work with. Some of them are pretty active on Twitter, and I think find it as a good way to remain connected and networked with their peers. So from a clinical standpoint, I see it being used a lot. And always, whenever I attend clinical meetings and so on, there's always a lot of talk of Twitter being used in that standpoint.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, can you comment on your kind of interactions with clinicians from an engineering background? Has there been challenges? Do you have any tips on kind of some of these interactions?
Yeah, so that's a big part of what I do is to uncover clinical needs, and a big part of that is speaking with clinicians and with physicians who are out there using devices, treating diseases, interacting with patients. And so that's something that I think is a really cool part about my job is being able to work in that area. I think for having an engineering background gives a good perspective, and I think many of the physicians we speak to appreciate, being able to talk to people with more technical backgrounds, because we're always going to have a different perspective on a problem than they may have, and so I think it's learning from them, listening a lot. I think the key is just listening, and trying to understand, ask lots of questions. If you're able to watch cases or go see a case, that can be really beneficial as well. And being able to dig in and try to understand those clinical needs is something that's critical for an R&D being a medical device, but also something I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, and I can completely agree with that, being at Mayo. It's very rewarding working with clinicians, listening to, they have a lot of knowledge, and you can learn a lot from spending time with them in their cases. So kind of in terms of your team that you work with at Cook, is it a very diverse team? Does the team integrate, quantitative skills from engineering with more, with kind of the input from the clinicians? Is it very integrative?
Yeah. So it is. It's something I really enjoy about my work, is that, we have a lot of people with engineering backgrounds, but also business, people from clinical backgrounds, and then, getting to work with people, with physicians, with business folks, other types of engineers, with scientists we have on our team. And so I think I'm a big proponent of cross-disciplinary teams, because it provides a lot of different perspectives. And again, the key is just listening, trying to learn from as many different perspectives as you can when you're trying to solve a problem or research a new topic or propose a solution or something like that.
So is the team you're working with, the team composition, maybe the team size, different now compared to when you were at the startup? Is there pros and cons of working with a bigger team versus a smaller team?
Yeah, so my team's definitely bigger. Our new ventures team as a whole has, I think, about 20 people. On a day-to-day, I work with a much smaller group than that. And so there's pros and cons. I think the more perspectives, the better, but sometimes it makes just the logistics of problem solving and communicating a little bit harder. So kind of how I think is sometimes works the best is, do small things in small groups, and then expand out from there to try to get as much stakeholder feedback as you can on topics. But I enjoy working with people. I enjoy working with people from different backgrounds. So in some sense, for me, the more people, the better. But if it's too big, then it can make actually getting anything done challenging sometimes.
Yeah, no, I understand. I came from a smaller group in undergraduate, and now I'm in a bigger research environment, so it's a little bit more. It's great, and there's more people to discuss ideas with, but it can be challenging in other ways. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask Emma one more question. If anyone submitted a question that wasn't answered, we'll follow up with you after the webinar. I also want to just make a plug to keep an eye out for the next BMES interview with industry, which will happen in April. Also want to note that I hope everyone is staying safe during COVID-19 situation. So kind of on that vein, I know a lot of us are working from home or studying from home. Do you have any tips from your experiences for optimizing this process. I know that for myself, there's a lot of distractions being at home.
Yeah.
And then maybe a quick follow-up if you want to just quickly talk about, Cook's view and the industry's view on the effects of this pandemic. How has it affected your work environment?
Yeah, so I've recently started working from home. I think I'm on like day 6. And I haven't worked from home much in my career, so I'm trying to find best practices and so on. You have to, do what works best for you. For me, it's finding a corner of the house that I can isolate myself. I try to get as far away from the kitchen as possible or any distractions that I have. I try to make my setup very similar to how it is at work, so I've got my monitors and try to simulate my work environment as much as possible. And then in terms of, COVID-19, obviously there's lots of challenges. I'm lucky enough to be in an industry where we can try to find solutions. So Cook is trying to do, everything it can to help out. We do make products that are used on these patients. So as an organization, we're trying to figure out the most we can do as a company to help this crisis. And as you all know, things are changing on a daily basis. So we're just trying to do our part. I'm trying to do my part and try to get through this, and we will.
Yeah, we will get through it. I just want to thank you, Emma, for your time today. I think you provided a lot of really insightful thoughts and from your experiencing and a lot of great lessons that I hope our viewers can take back and implement into their their career paths. And I also want to thank the viewers for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the learning from Emma today. And I'd like to thank you for your time, and hope everyone has a great day. Goodbye.
Yes, thank you, everyone.